until Ashley can join us. This open meeting of the Master Plan Implementation Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of COVID-19 virus, the town of Northborough has been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's office suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. All members of the Master Plan Implementation Committee are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order allows the Master Plan Implementation Committee to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of this meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access did not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. Next thing we need to do is take attendance. So when I call your name, please indicate here or something like that. We'll start with the staff. Kathy Jubert.
Yep, present.
John Kader.
Present.
Scott Charpentier.
Present.
Donnie Goris Kolb.
I'm here. Hello.
Right. Julianne Hirsch.
Here.
Amy Paretsky.
Here.
Millie Milton. Not yet. Ashley Davis, as I said, will be joining us. Tracy Camarano.
Present.
Adrian Cost. Not yet. Bill Peterson.
Present.
Moving on to citizens at large, Fran Backstrom.
Present.
Gene Kennedy.
Present.
Gene Cahill.
Here.
Rick Leaf, present. John Campbell.
I'm here.
Dario DeMar.
Here.
One thing I'd like to do just quickly is just move up the consideration of the minutes. They were sent out to everybody. Are there any changes or comments or anything about the minutes before we vote to approve them?
I have some comments.
Go ahead, Gene.
On the second page, near the bottom, there's a paragraph that starts, Mr. Kennedy. I think it would be a little bit more clear on the fourth line. Instead of saying various liaisons will allow them, it should read the commit will allow the committee to come up with, instead of pointed, I would use the term ranked, a ranked set of recommendations. And then finally, on my notes, the meeting ended about 8:35, not 7:26.
Okay. Other comments, changes? I'll just add one. I noticed in the list of attendees, I was listed as vice chair or co-chair, and then a little bit further down the list, I was listed again. So I can be removed the second time in the list. Any other changes or comments? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I think,
Oh, sorry.
Tracy, did you have a change? Oh, okay.
Okay,
Sorry,
so
Rick.
who made the motion to approve? Julianne made the motion to approve, and who made the motion to second?
Amy.
Amy did. All in favor of accepting the minutes as accepted, say aye.
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 All opposed?
Aye.
Okay, minutes are accepted as amended. Next item on the agenda is to review the mission statement. I know there's been quite a bit of discussion outside of the meeting about that. Ashley has sent me some information to talk about if in fact she's not here as we go along, but I think I'd like to start by having Kathy sort of bring us back up to speed as to the background of how the mission was developed. And I think John might have some comments also. So Kathy, why don't you go ahead and start?
Sure. The, after your last meeting, which I could not connect with, and again, my apologies for that, but I had sent out, I watched your meeting live. So the next, I think it was the next day after, whatever, I sent out the memo that was originally sent to the Board of Selectmen back in September of 2020. And included in that memo is the mission statement for this committee. Staff, myself and John Cadere, the town administrator, we had worked on coming up with a mission statement, which obviously is needed first before you do any kind of creation of a committee or advertising for the committee. It was then, posted on the town's website. Everyone that had, applied obviously had read the, let me put it this way, I'm assuming had read the information. But anyway, so the mission statement and some of the just very general tasks, had been developed, sent to the Board of Selectmen. I presented it at a Board of Selectmen's meeting, and then from there, we did the advertising for the committee. So everyone should have a copy of that by now. So your mission statement basically has already been created prior to the selectmen selecting people for the committee. John, I don't know if you want to go into more details on.
Yeah, through the chair, if I may, it's a great mission, a great scope. But essentially what we have, you guys are an advisory committee. You're looking at the master plan, which was a long process. And really your charge is to go through all that information and come up with the list of priorities out of the list of priorities. So essentially what we're looking for is a set of goals and tasks in a priority order that this group, based on its representation and all the work that was done with regard to the development of the master plan itself, what do you see as the priorities? And then what I would envision is there was a back and forth working with staff in my office to start to put some context around that. So find out what the priorities are, put that in the context of everything else that we have going on in town. Clearly, many of these things, not all of them, but many of these are going to require resources, either in the form of staffing and/or budgets. And so that is a process in and of itself. So there are other boards and committees, as I know you're aware of. We have the Appropriations Committee that reviews all the budgets, and we also have the Financial Planning Committee that has a 6-year capital improvement plan. And one of the things I wanted to make sure you guys were aware of is when we were going through this process, we had some discussions, and Bill Peterson is your representative from financial planning, but we had some discussions as a committee at that time that the Master Plan Implementation Committee is going to get going. They're going to have some priority projects. More than likely, they're going to require some resources of some kind. And so we actually put placeholders in the 6-year capital plan for fiscal 23 and 24, so the next 2 fiscal years, and just with a TBA. So there isn't any specific project or dollar figure associated with it, but the idea was we know it's coming, and so we put a placeholder in there in the capital plan, and that of course is always with all capital plans is flexible in terms of moving up or back depending on availability of funds, grant funds, and other priorities. So really what we're looking for out of this group is to help work through this process of what are the priorities. Now I looked at, and I don't want to jump ahead, but downtown, some questions about town properties. There's a pedestrian and bicycle accessibility. Those throughout the whole master plan process, those are 3 things that I heard loud and clear. And so I would anticipate that there will be Those will be probably among, based on what I've seen so far, those will be among the priorities. And so really what we'll do then is we'll look at bringing those together through the budgeting process, working with the departments, determining what's needed for staffing, resources, budgets, what's available for grants, and start to put a plan together with you and an agreed upon timeline for how we're going to accomplish these things. Because with anything, we want to manage expectations, and we want people to we want to have a chance to make sure that all the stakeholders, and clearly the staff and the other boards and committees whose responsibilities are for finances, capital planning, recreation, and so forth, that they have a seat at that process too, to work through those priorities. And really, when you look at the mission statement that's on the website and the mission statement that you received when you were appointed, I mean, that's what it says. Develop the priorities, work with the appropriate boards and committees, working with my office, to really come up with a viable plan that we sort of can agree to through consensus about the timeline, the resources, and how we're going to get from point A to point B for those priorities that have been identified by this group. The other thing is, and I'm not prepared to do it this evening, but I would like to do this at a subsequent meeting with your indulgence, is as you go through the priority listings in the master plan, as I heard you at your last meeting speak to this, that there are a lot of, I think John Campbell made the comment like, well, there's a lot of things that are already happening and we don't want to duplicate efforts, and we should know where those things stand. And so, like under recreation priorities, we have, and John knows this, the pickleball courts, we got the Assabet Park project that's ongoing. We're coming forward. We got a dog park initiative. There's applications coming for a senior center walking trail proposal. Under the sustainability piece, we're a green communities participant. We have $170,000 of grants this year that we already are working through for energy efficiency programs and so forth. We have participated in municipal vulnerabilities planning grant. So we have plans associated with that. There are priorities for climate resilience that are within there. We did work on a solar feasibility that stalled a little bit, but now that I have a facilities manager, we're picking that back up again. Obviously, under public facilities, there's the town office feasibility study. There's the White Cliffs project, the old fire station, then the old fire station. So 11 Pierce Street, and then you have the one on Church Street. These are all projects that are in the works in terms of economic development in the downtown and walkability. Scott Charpentier, the DPW director, is here. We've spent the last 2 years working on compiling a sidewalk management plan, just like those of you that have been through the process for the roadway management plan. Inventoried every sidewalk, identified the condition they're in, creating a priority list. So those are all processes that are ongoing, and there's more. But so what I want to do, and I'd like to do for you, is we'll work through the priorities, and then I want to be able to update the committee on a lot of things that are in the master plan implementation are things that are already ongoing in various stages. So we want to make sure that we meld that stuff and bring that stuff all together. So, but the key here is that this is a collaborative process, and obviously we, the staff in my office, are tasked with the budget preparation and the deployment of resources. So we just need to talk about what we want to know from you. We want to know what the priorities are. What do you see as the priorities? And then we, as I said, kind of mash that up with what we have going on right now. A lot of this stuff is being already worked on, so we can update you on that, and then map out an agreed upon attack for where do we see this going and what's the timeline, so people know what to expect. And part of that is knowing what these things may cost us and making sure they get into the related board and committee processes like capital planning. So for instance, if we decide downtown, and I guess from 14, it's the top priority from both the short and the long term from what I see, downtown, well, then we should be talking about what are we looking at? Are we looking at a downtown master plan? How much would that cost? and how do we work that into the capital planning process? So that's sort of the big picture. So I don't think we need to have long discussions about, redoing a mission. Mission's pretty clear. It was part of your charge when you appointed. We should be focusing on priorities and then negotiating through consensus back and forth of what those priorities are, how they fit into the bigger picture, and develop a critical timeline together about when these things will get done. And then part of your mission statement is to periodically evaluate the plan and to see how things are going. So we would come back at agreed upon points in that critical timeline, provide updates on some of the projects I just mentioned, and then the new ones that you would like to add in, and keep you informed. And if we need to adjust or discuss approaches, that would be the things that we would be doing on an ongoing, continuous basis. So I hope that makes sense to everybody, and I hope it kind of clarifies. And I just got to say, I'm excited to get these projects, to get some clarity about the priorities and to get them into the process and start moving on some of that we haven't. Probably the biggest one in there is the downtown. And I think that if I look at everything that we're talking about here, I think the most discussion and the most feedback that we'd be looking for as staff and the other boards and committees is, what is the approach? What is it that we want to see happen in the downtown? And what's that project? What do we think it'll cost? What's the scope of services, and how do we move that one forward, being a top priority? So it's a lot I just covered, but through the chair, I'm happy to answer any questions anybody might have about anything I just went through.
Okay, I guess I see Ashley's in the meeting now, so before I sort of transfer the chair over to her, I think, John, you and Scott are planning to stay through the meeting, because I think a lot of the things you talked about at the end of your talk are appropriate for the discussion we're going to have in the next item on the agenda, which is a discussion of the committee itself as to reviewing these summarizations of what people selected, and sort of coming up with what we think we want to do and how we want to do it, kind of thing. So although the votes look a certain way, I think the committee needs to discuss that and make some decisions. And then I think your input and Scott's input will be helpful as we go down that path. So I guess moving back to the mission, which is where we are on the agenda right now. Ashley, I guess from my perspective, I guess the next step here would be just to see from your perspective and anybody else on the committee who has comments or questions that we want to get on the table and discuss. So I'll turn that back over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I missed a majority of what John said, so I'm not sure what to say at this point, but I'll see if anybody else has any comments or questions. I have one, but I'm not sure if it's been covered, so I'll kind of wait.
Let me just summarize then for a second, because you and I had a number of discussions today about this. I think John was reinforcing that from the perspective of how the mission was developed, it was on an advisory basis. The idea of determining priorities, working with different town boards and departments to get things scheduled and agreed to, and then keeping track of, what's being done and reporting out on that. So the concept of the committee forming an advisory function was kind of the thought process behind the mission. I know you and I have sent some ideas back and forth about that, but I think to boil down what John was trying to portray to the committee, that's kind of where he and Kathy were coming from when the mission was written.
Yeah, so I guess I have a clarifying question, and that's just that, if I think when the master plan was created, there's pretty much every goal was assigned to a particular board or committee or department. But if there was something that came up that was something sort of interim or peripheral that needed to be done to kind of move something forward before going to a board, or if a committee needs to be created, like the downtown committee, do we just recommend the creation of the committee? Can we assist boards with work? I just didn't know if there was room for that in the way that the mission was written, or if that's even something we could contemplate doing.
Yeah, through the chair, or to the chair or the vice chair or the co-chair.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, look, this is going to be a great process, guys. It's going to be a great process. And I would like us to just approach it and let it unfold, because I think we have the capacity here to do a lot of great things And if committees need to be created, then that's a larger discussion because this, depending on the nature of the committee, it may be, we would have to define who the appointing authority is, things of that nature, if they need a budget and stuff like that. So I think we want to we'll have those conversations. And I think that I'm confident through consensus and through just working together that we're going to kind of map out something that makes sense to us all. I've done
Okay.
a lot of big building projects in town and worked with a lot of boards and committees. And I know sometimes in the beginning, people start to well, they really want everything defined. And what I find is if we come to it in the spirit, which I know everybody's here to do, which is we're all trying to get to the same place, then I think we're going to be able to work through that. And I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised at A, what's been done already, and B, we do have resources. We have the fiscal year, it was not closed out yet, but our free cash is not certified. So I'm not prepared to speak to it tonight, but we did finish the year well. We'll have some resources. And as I said, we have at least 2 placeholders in the capital plan, and they're not 6 years out, they're next year for these projects. So if you tell me downtown is your priority and we want to do a master plan downtown project, and we can spend a couple meetings as a group talking about what's that scope and what do we hope to get out of it, then my job is to find the financing because the town has gone through this process. You're telling me this is the priority, and then it all builds so that I'm able to go to capital planning, and Bill Peterson is able to go to financial planning committee and say, hey, listen, this is how this works. This is why when we go to town meeting, capital projects and things like this, like the master plan, have the unanimous support of every member of every board and committee, because there's a process that we follow. And it takes a little bit longer because you have to build consensus and you have to consult with a lot of people. But the great thing about it is, I mean, I can't think, there isn't a single CPC project, John, in how many years that didn't go to town meeting with unanimous support, or Bill from financial planning. Like, that's how we do. And that's how I see this happening. We'll work together, we'll get the priorities. And I hope you would listen to me, because part of it too might be, listen, if we want to do X, we're going to need another staff person. And that means ultimately, if we agree that this is where we want to go and these are the resources, that I would be hoping that, in accordance with your mission statement, that you would help advocate at town meeting for why a position is needed, or a particular budget is needed, or why a project is needed. And so that sort of collaboration. And then when you're standing up at town meeting, you should have the full support of my office, the Board of Selectmen, the Financial Planning Committee, and the Appropriations Committee. That's where we're heading. These are great projects. And like I said, the staff is really excited to dig into some of these.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify kind of where my questions are coming from, because you mentioned how downtown is, and we'll discuss how downtown is really a huge priority, and probably our first kind of step will be to work on the downtown. And I know in the master plan, it's laid out creation of a downtown revitalization committee, and kind of the way my brain was working around that was that the committee comes first and the master plan is kind of something that they work on. So that's why I was just wondering about how do we go about creating that committee, or advising, recommending to the selectmen to create that committee, and if that is what we do, we should do it quickly, and we should do, like, I don't want to talk about it 3 meetings from now. We should talk about it soon. And just that's why the clarification is needed, not waiting for it to unfold, but like, let's do it. There are grant opportunities available for it. I know there's already budgeting available in town, which is awesome. But why not, kind of jump on it and take advantage of those grants? That's the only reason why why those questions arose.
Yeah.
So thank you.
And that would be a discussion, because I'm sure everybody has thoughts on whether or not we need a committee or a plan first. But yeah, that would be part of the process, I would think. Yeah.
Amy?
Yeah, I just have a quick question about the mission statement, only because I am the planning board rep, and the master plan falls under the purview of the planning board. So I did take a class on creating a master plan for your community, and the tasks that are listed underneath with stars that Kathy and staff came up with are word for word what came out of the class. They're in the packet I have, except for one that was added is working with the planning board on zoning articles which forward the goals and recommendations, which if we're just an advisory committee, I think we can advise through some of the other bullets where it says continue to work with boards, committees, departments. I don't think we need working with the planning board on zoning articles because, I mean, if we're going to have that, we could have working with the BOS and Finance Committee and CPC on funding the master plan recommendations and goals. Like, it was a bullet that was added, and I'm just wondering, Kathy or John, why that one was added to the list. But others
I
weren't.
don't know why, look, I don't, certainly through the chair, like, we're kind of stepping back here and kind of going backwards of the mission statement. The mission statement, I think, is general enough for us to do what I just discussed. And, you know, going back and hashing out a mission statement that already exists, I'm not sure what the value in is
mean,
at. in
John,
that.
The task was added, like, the task isn't an advisory task, like we had just talked about, that it's an advisory board, but this is like actually getting down into the details that we're going to work with the planning board on zoning articles. So I
Yeah.
don't think it's needed.
I don't remember,
to be-
I don't remember if that had to do with the downtown and the potential need to rezone or do something with downtown zoning. I don't really recall, to be honest with you.
I think, Rick or Ashley,
Yep.
I think you might be reading too much into that, Amy, where it's, what I did was, I talked to various consultants, before we put together the implementation committee, talked to various planners in Massachusetts, got copies of all of their, if they had an implementation committee. Some towns do, some towns don't, some towns call it something else. And so I took what I thought was the best of from a variety of these communities. And like you said, there's also, which is a great resource for all of us, which is the community planning training, planners training collaborative. So given that the master plan is largely a land-based document, and as John had mentioned, we knew through the steering committee that and every public workshop that we did, downtown. And so part of that is going to be this, not so much the implementation committee drafting zoning, but it's going to be, directing myself and the planning board, suggesting to the planning board what it is that we need to come up with in order to get the downtown that people are going to agree on through this process. And like I was mentioning at the planning board meeting the other night, I don't know at this point, but there may be changes to density, there may be changes to setbacks, there may be changes to land use, parking regulations. So all of that is heavily going to factor into zoning bylaws. So you certainly want coordination between this committee, and the downtown committee, however that comes to be, and the planning board. I mean, it only makes sense. It would be a big hole if you didn't have that.
I agree, but I think it's covered in the other that says continue to work with boards, committees, and departments on implementation. It's already included. So
Again, there's nothing negative about it. I mean, it's all, it's all positive. It's all collaboration. And if we don't have that, then
Then we should probably add it in for the Board of Selectmen too, like, because we do want to collaborate with them too.
Well, I think through the chair, if I may,
well,
that's the
I
mission
just want to
statement
allow
that,
Fran, because Fran's had her hand raised for a while. Fran, did you have
Okay.
something that was in relation to this?
Sure, sorry, Ashley. I just want to say that, I think that we should welcome the idea that we're going to collaborate with the planning board. I would love to be able to go to town meeting and actually stand behind Amy and be 100% behind the zoning articles that the planning board puts forward at town meeting, and say, as a member of this committee, we were behind them, encouraging them to move those forward. So I see this only as a very positive and additional, because it is more important that we collaborate with planning than we do have to collaborate with everyone, but that is the primary partner in most of these articles, recommendation.
I agree. We should collaborate. I just wondered why it was added where the other ones weren't.
Okay, sorry, John, go ahead. I interrupted you to allow Frank.
No, it's fine. That's the mission statement. And why don't we get to the work and see how we do? Let's get doing what we're all here to do, is what I'll say.
Yeah, just before we move on, and John Campbell, I'll get to you one sec. I just want to make sure Kathy wasn't here at the last meeting, and that's probably why we thought that this was still an open discussion. I think this came from a couple of points that Donnie had made in the first meeting, just about how planning implementation committees begin, what the process is, and the first step in the process is establish and accept mission and duty. So that's kind of where we were at, and that's why this came up. And Kathy wasn't here to correct us, but as people have been thinking about this, and it is on the agenda, I just want to make sure that everyone has a chance to just give their input before we move on. It would be good to just hear everyone's perspective and make sure it's open and free conversation before we close that agenda item. John Campbell?
I had a suggestion that I thought might move us forward off of or incorporating the mission statement. And that was, when you first asked for thoughts about it, the word prioritize was the key one. So how do we prioritize? And I wondered if we might take an example that we used at the CPC for prioritizing different proposals. And we established certain criteria, and it just might be a way to decide which items really demand our most immediate attention. One criteria would be urgency. Is it something we want to try to do this year, like you were talking about earlier? Another might be level of community support or value to the community. And another might be feasibility, or read that as affordability. So which projects really are practical to pursue, and which might be really more future oriented because of their cost. So that was just on my mind. I wanted to get it out there if it was helpful as a way to prioritize our agendas going forward.
Thanks, John. That's helpful. And I think that that's something we're going to need to discuss our kind of procedures for how we prioritize and move forward on projects. So I'll keep that in the notes. Does anybody else have any other comments on the mission before we move on from that agenda item?
Ashley, I do.
Yeah, Jean?
So I find the wording somewhat cumbersome as it was sent out by Kathy, and just think it could be wordsmithed a little bit less jargony and more directly. So what I reworded the introductory mission as is: the mission of the Master Plan Implementation Committee is to steward the master plan, to ensure that the elements of the master plan are properly addressed, and to advise the course of town activities that achieve goals and recommendations of the master plan. And another point that I think brings out kind of, what we're not necessarily prioritizing, but what are fundamental kind of core concepts of the work that we're doing is that it needs to include fundamental considerations. And so I put in a plug for environmental and economic sustainability as kind of overarching themes of the projects that we set out to frame and assist committees with.
Does anybody else have any other comments?
Sure.
Rick?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of different things we could do to this as far as wordsmithing or putting things in and putting things out. But my sense is that the mission basically hits the basic things that we need to do and why we need to do them. So my perspective, I think that if we go forward with this mission statement, it's not going to prevent us from getting the job done as we need to do it. And I definitely think as we go from meeting to meeting, to become clearer exactly how we're going to make these things happen. So I guess I would just be in favor of just leaving this as the mission and going forward and really starting to get started tonight on the actual work of prioritization. I think that's the most important thing. And I feel comfortable we could work with this plan as it's worded, or this mission as it's worded.
Thanks, Rick. And I know John and Kathy, you've made kind of your point. And just to confirm, if there were any small changes in terms of wording, is that something we can even do at this point? We'd have to get selectmen approval again. probably. I know, John, how you feel.
I
about
just
it.
feel like we're, again, we got a lot of people here, a lot of, resources here and, you can spend your time in this sort of this, I don't want to say minutia, but the mission statement was clear. I think what everybody's struggling with is, okay, how do we, to John Campbell's point, I think, how do we come up with our priorities? Like, so the mission of the Financial Planning Committee is clear. How they go about doing it, the processes, I think that's what, how do we go about ranking these priorities, that process, that's appropriate for the committee to be having those discussions, which I think is separate from the basic core of what you're assigned to do, which is develop priorities out of the master plan for implementation.
Okay, but
How you go about doing that is going to take some discussion.
It certainly is, and I would like to move on from this, but just to confirm, if there was just slight changes to this that, really made it clearer or anything like that, is that something we could do? Is that something that's possible at this point?
Yeah, anything's possible. We want to spend the time and resources. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And
We
Ashley, if I could just
Sure, Kathy, yeah.
with the steering committee, some of you were on the steering committee. It's very, and it's not unique to this master plan process. It's whenever a new committee is created in town, the mission statement is formulated first. You can't create a committee and then do the mission statement, because why did you all get on the committee? You allegedly would be saying you didn't know why you were on the committee, and now you want to create what your job description is. Whereas, you put your mission statement together first. It's purposely general. I mean, any mission statement, unless it's a very specific ad hoc committee that's, created for a 6-month process for a very specific project. So we as staff, we all believe that it's broad enough. And like the steering committee, there was a mission statement. And then as some of you can recall, we went in a few little different directions during the course of the steering committee. So it just naturally evolved. And I think, again, echoing John, the same thing is going to happen here. I mean, everyone's goal is to move this master plan forward. So that's, that's really your next step. I always say as a staff person, but I mean, that's your next step is getting to those recommendations, the homework that you've done, and how do we go forward from there.
Okay. All right, Julianne, did you have a comment?
Yeah, so I guess I need more clarification than most. So just to be clear, if we decide that we want a downtown redevelopment committee, we can do that. We are going to consult with the Board of Selectmen, Finance, and CPC about funding. And the last thing is, I really have to support Jean in requesting that all of our actions consider environmental issues in the climate. And I don't see any problem in including that in our new list of priorities. I mean, since the mission statement was written and now many things have changed. And I think this is a very important consideration. So that's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thanks, Julianne. I just want to comment on that, is that this mission statement doesn't touch on any priorities. Priorities are in the master plan. And one of the things we're tasked with through this mission is adjusting the master plan as things change. So I think that might be the avenue to take to adjust to a changing climate and a changing world is to, maybe add to or work on the master plan itself, but not this mission. I think this mission doesn't touch on priorities at all, just mentions priorities as a word. But sorry, Rick.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I think that as we get into the prioritizing what comes out of the plan, if we decide that the plan itself is missing something that's now important, we can talk through, okay, how do we go about bringing forward some ideas that weren't in the plan? We can get some feedback from Donnie about that as we meet on the plan itself. And if we find that there's something that we really think is important that's not covered, we can talk about how we sort of take that at that point, but I agree with Ashley that the mission doesn't really get into the specific items we'd recommend.
All right.
I think Dario's got his hand up.
Oh, sorry. Yep. And then Jean, sorry, Dario.
Yeah, no problem. And I think to most of John and everybody else's point, I think the sooner we get past the mission statement, the better, but I don't think there's a problem if Gene wants to write something and change it, then spend 5 minutes on our next meeting and vote, say yes or no, and then go forward so that we don't have to dwell over it, throw something out there. If it sticks and everybody's happy, we go forward. If not, then we're done debating on whether we do anything. So that could make it happen very quickly, and we just say yes or no. And if everybody agrees, we modify it, bring the environment in. If we don't agree, then at least everybody got heard and we don't squash anybody on the way through the process.
Yeah, I mean,
would it be possible? I'm sorry, I don't have a way to raise my hand. I'm on the phone. But would it be possible to take a straw poll and just see if anybody really, if we can move along with this as it stands, the mission statement, and then if we have more people who want to revisit it, do what Dario says, is revisit it again next year? I mean, next meeting?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think Jean had a comment before we do that.
I was gonna, and it's consistent with what Dario just said, make a motion to adopt the mission statement as compiled by town staff, vote on it and move on, which leaves us as a committee able to make any amendments, additions, or subtractions anytime we want. But it'll get us off this topic, get
Yeah.
into the next agenda item with the flexibility that if it has to be discussed again and additional amendments or changes made, we could do it.
Ashley, through the chair, if I may, just
Yeah.
the mission statement set by the board, that's what was given to you guys. But I think the stuff that you're talking about, how you're going to prioritize and wait and come up to your decisions, that's really what you're talking about. So I would proceed to that. The mission statement is designed to be general enough that gives you the flexibility to do just that. So if within your priorities, you want to make sustainability one of the criteria upon which you're going to rank these projects, then by all means that you should do that. So I think we're all saying the same thing here.
Yeah, and I don't think we need an official vote, but if we want to take a quick just poll to see, do we need to consider this at another meeting, or, you know, who feels that we can move on and with the mission as it stands? Should I do roll call here, kind of?
Sure.
Yep.
Amy?
I'm all set to move forward, I guess.
Okay. Julianne?
Well, I'm all set to move forward with the provision as Mr. Kennedy suggested, that, you know, we consider some of the other topics as we move along.
Yeah, okay. All right, Rick?
Move forward.
Okay. Dario?
What Julian said.
Fran?
Fine with the mission statement as it's written. Thank you.
Tracy?
Move forward.
Eugene?
Move forward.
Adrian? Okay. Bill?
Move forward.
John Campbell?
Move forward.
And who am I missing? Jean Cahill.
Move forward with just one caveat, which is if the mission includes the list of tasks, the tasks don't specifically call out prioritization, which it sounds like is our primary task.
Can you, sorry, I want to make sure I understand what you're saying, that the mission as it's written currently doesn't have prioritization in it, right? Is that the sticking point for you?
Yeah, it says a lot of other things, but it doesn't actually make the point that we are essentially prioritizing.
Yeah, yep. Okay.
Ashley, do you have me in as an
Oh,
attendee? It's Milton.
Yeah, Millie, sorry.
Okay, no worries. But I'd like to move forward. I'm okay with the mission statement.
Okay. All right. Well, that was fun. All right, next agenda item is the review of the recommendations. And I can share my, I don't know if I can share, yeah, I can share my screen. I can share my screen with the spreadsheet that I sent around today, if that would be helpful. Okay.
Sure.
Let's see. All right. Let's see if I can see all of you while I'm have the spreadsheet open. So this was the spreadsheet that Michelle created, just put in some very shortened descriptions of what each goal from the master plan was, and then categorized them. That was Rick's idea, which I think was really helpful to kind of see, because so many of these goals have to do with the downtown and could really be looked at in conjunction, and should be looked at in conjunction. And so when you really break it down in that way, which I did at the bottom in terms of category, we see that downtown is above and beyond the top priority in short-term recommendations as well as in overall recommendations. So I think that's probably something that we should be focusing on first. And I know that there's a lot of discussion about how we prioritize things. So I'm open to hear if people want to discuss the process for prioritization before we kind of jump into this discussion. So there we are.
So actually, I might be interested at this point in hearing from Donnie in terms of what other towns do and what he'd recommend we think about doing if it looks like, you know, we want to start to go forward with moving this downtown project forward, what he'd suggest our next best steps would be.
Yeah.
So Rick, you're asking me specifically to the downtown and what the master plan implementation committee can do with respect to the downtown and how it could
Not
address
so
it,
much, well,
the
it
next
just,
steps?
yeah, kind of like, it seems pretty, I mean, I'm not sure. One thing I guess we have to talk about is whether we sort of go around and take a roll call vote and have everybody say, yeah, we agree, this is the top priority, and officially take a vote on it. But before we do that, or if we're going to do that, let's just say that we do that, and this committee has agreed that the first thing we want to do is get the town going on doing something up this downtown. So what would the next thing we or the town would have to do?
Well, I think the town administrator sort of hit the nail on the head there. You need to start to developing what that scope of work is going to look like, what the plan is going to include. So you see a number of these things that are highlighted here. You know, creating the planning and revitalization committee, evaluating designated. I don't think all of the downtown items are highlighted here.
No,
but
they're
other
not,
categories on the
sorry.
side. Yeah, no, that's okay. I was drawn to the highlight. But the point is that there's probably a number of different recommendations here that are at the planning level that could be incorporated into a downtown master plan or a downtown revitalization study. So I think that the first thing that you want to do is determine whether or not that's the study that you want to undertake, and then what would the scope of work be for that. And you know, given that, what that scope of work could include, as I said, multiple actions that are identified within the master plan. And just going back, if I may take a step back, you know, throughout the master planning process, if you recall, downtown was frequently mentioned amongst the community in every engagement touch point that we had, on every master plan advisory committee meeting, steering committee meeting that we had. You know, we went over community feedback, and it was the downtown that kept on popping up at the forefront of the conversation. So I just wanted to give that perspective, because many of you were not on the steering committee, but some of you were, and those that were probably do remember the downtown showing up and being a frequent topic of discussion.
At this, I mean, at this point, my question is, with all of these items that have to do with downtown, this is where I'm wondering, do you create the committee first and they kind of tackle all of these pieces? Or, does the town feel like the studies and the plan have to come first? I mean, I think we want to take, I think I don't want to put words in people's mouths, but I think the committee as a whole wants to take a step to really get something started in the short term and really, make progress. And downtown is clearly the item that we need to start on, but we just don't know which item makes the most sense in terms of the town's current funding and planning. That should go first.
Yeah, actually, I can speak to that if
Yeah,
you'd like me
that'd
to.
be
So
yeah.
what would be helpful to me as staff, and again, what I'm looking for from you out of this process is, tell me what it is that you want in terms of a scope. Like, do we want to just because here's the bottom line. We don't have the staff capacity to do a downtown study. We're going to need some consulting assistance. I think everybody would agree to that, right? So we're going to need a consultant, but we need to figure out what it is we want that consultant to do. Develop a scope of services, and maybe Donnie can help us with that as you kind of talk through what it is that you'd like to get out of this. And then we basically come up with an estimate of what we think that will cost. And then, frankly, it's going to be my job to figure out that this is the top priority out of the master plan. I got to find a way to make sure that I get that through the budget process, and we make that happen. So you guys tell me what it is that you want. Do you want, and there's all different pieces as you read through the master plan. What exactly is the downtown? I'm not entirely clear. So is that something we want the consultant to work with us on determining what the downtown is? And then what are what specifically are the issues or the tasks that we would like them to do? Do we want focus groups? Do we want what are we going to do? It's almost like a mini master plan, but just focused on the downtown. But I'm looking for you guys. You tell me what you want in that scope of service. And then what would happen, what I would envision happening is that we get that together from everybody. We put it together. We work with Donnie to kind of polish it up into a request for proposals or an RFQ, and that we can bid out. And then there's be a selection process of a consultant, and then the work is going to really begin. But that's, in my vision, in my assessment, that's what we would want to focus on first.
Okay.
Yeah, and just following up on John, the downtown revitalization or a master plan is like a mini comprehensive plan. It's very much focused on a specific area, so you do get into more specifics than you do at a master plan level, and you're able to do that because you sort of need to move the ball, to get the ball rolling in terms of the initiatives and the outcomes that you want to see. You do have to set the stage for a study area. So what do you want to define the downtown to be, as John mentioned? And we talked a little bit about that during the master planning process as well. Just is it along the major corridor route, or is it, does it move outside of the corridor route and expand beyond that as well? That's a component of a downtown revitalization plan as well. There could be some design components to a master plan, looking at what kind of massing, what kind of building facades, what kind of look and feel that you want your downtown to have. And I know we've had those conversations during the overall master planning process as well. But I think my larger point is that a downtown revitalization plan is sort of a mini comprehensive plan with more specifics, and you do get to dive into a little bit of design, a little bit of in doing so. So just given that background on what a revitalization plan might look like. And going and developing a scope, what we can do, we can provide scope language that you can review and comment on. We could provide examples of downtown master plans that you can review on your own time and see what pieces you like, what pieces you don't like, what do you think is going to be most relevant for Northborough. There's a couple of ways that we can go about doing that.
I mean, that sounds fabulous, getting to comment on already written scope language. So,
Agreed, and I was hoping the consultant would do it.
did not know that was going to be an option, and that's great. I mean, I'd love to hear from everyone. I know, downtown as a category got the most votes, but there is also this pedestrian access sort of sidewalk improvements work that got the most votes as a single goal. But I just want to make sure, is everybody on board to kind of tackle downtown as our first step as a committee? Dario?
Yeah, and unfortunately, I just got a call, so I'm gonna have to leave in a little bit, but I just wanted to comment a little bit on the downtown, the master plan, and how I think we should proceed, or even I'll put it more in English. Having done so many of these, we've made a decision, which I think is really good, that downtown is the priority. And when we do master plans, there's kind of three things at a high level. There's the facts, which is what we have. So we need to get it drawn up, and maybe it's all drawn up by VHB, which would be great, because now we have at least something to look at. Then we have the rules, which are the zoning and DOT regs and all the safety rules. And then the thing that we are in control of or advising on are the goals. And that's where we are now. So when we, as the implementation committee, there's 15 or 20 downtown things that we want to do, we organize these in a way that communicate exactly what we're trying to accomplish. And that should be pretty simple to do. And I can help, scribe it based on everybody's input. But once we say that, okay, we want to do this, we want more sidewalks, we want street lamps, we want to, they'll call it when you, I just forgot the word, but when you sharpen the curbs to slow down traffic, bulb. When you bulb the curbs, you get a little downtown parking, because a lot of times downtowns fail because you can't park there, because we're still a car society. So if we come up with all these things that will make the downtown walkable, enjoyable, classic, New England downtown that everybody wants to see with the Norman Rockwell paintings, and then give that to PAB, they can run with it. So I think it's all here, but if we just say, here's what we want to do and kind of spell it out, then these guys or whoever we hire to actually implement it have our goals. They're going to know the facts and they're going to know the rules, because that's their job. They know what they can and can't do with regard to parking, with regard to traffic and lights, safety, and the railroad crossing and everything else. So we don't have to get bogged down with that minutia. But it's really up to us. It's no different than programming a house. I say, how many bedrooms do you want? Do you want the porch in the front or in the back? That's the question they're asking us. And when we put that together, it should be pretty simple for VHB or whoever we hire to actually draw that up. And then that gives John and everybody else the direction they need to get scheduling and financing and implementation in order, because we finally drew the picture of what our goals are. And us prioritizing those is really where we are right now. Mm-hmm. And I think when they're defined, it's really easy to run.
So Dario, are you referring to the development of the scope or the plan itself?
I believe so.
Yeah,
it's really our goals more than which would entail the scope. We want more sidewalks. We want the facades to look nice. We want street lamps. We want a nice signature sidewalk that's maybe it's brick with the granite curb, so it looks nice. All the things that we're trying to say, and a lot of us don't know how to say it, but to give you that direction, and then you guys put together, okay, here's how we accomplish your goals.
Well, I think what you're saying is, I think you're taking it to the next level. So, yeah. So the scope would include all of the downtown goals from the master plan, and from there, whatever consultant we hire can kind of take our vision and make it into a plan.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's get back to what you're saying, Ashley, about just confirming that our committee agrees this is the first thing we should be working on.
Yeah. Does anybody have any comments that, we should really be focusing on, you know, sidewalk improvements or something else. Although I think that is a good piece of what could go into the master plan. I mean, the downtown master plan, but it would be beyond. I mean,
we also, just so people don't think that the sidewalk recommendation is lost. That's why Scott's here tonight. And to talk about when we get to the next recommendation. Scott's going to give you some details about what's already going on in his department and based on it being one of your recommendations, what he will be doing with his department.
great. Yeah, I think, you know, if we're all in agreement on this downtown piece and Donnie can, you know, provide us with a scope that we can all work on between now and the next meeting or the following one, then we can move on, I think, to what's kind of already been accomplished by all committees and staff members, and that would be a good time to hear from Scott.
Yeah, I'm really sorry I gotta go. Sorry.
Okay, thanks, Dario.
Apologize.
I see Adrian has her hand up, and then Jean Kennedy. Oh, Adrian, you're muted. I don't think I can. There you go.
There, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, my question is, do we have a definition of what downtown is? Where does it start and where does it end? So we know what specifically place we're talking about?
No. I think that was what John Codere was referring to, maybe something that the consultant we hire could help us determine.
Yeah. If I may, just, you know, Dario was kind of jumping to the implementation piece of it. And I think although I think we all have our own ideas and concepts of what we'd like to see, I think that in and of itself is the process, the downtown master plan process of getting agreement on exactly what it is we want to do, some basic cost estimates, and then trying to work that into the capital plan and other plans to do the implementation piece of it. That's where you get into bidding, construction documents, and so forth. But I think we were jumping a little quick into that, and I don't think, and Donnie, correct me if I'm wrong, I think what we're talking about is a scope of service to hire a consultant to walk us through that, to get us through that process. A part of which I think has to be some process for defining what's the scope, like what's the downtown.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because if you recall, well, I mean, you live in Northborough, you know this. I don't have to remind you. But Route 20 goes right through your downtown, and the big point of contention during the master plan was, you know, does that make sense? Do we want to have downtown, you know, sort of centered on Route 20 when it doesn't allow for the flexibility that we need because we don't own the roadway and the right of way. So, you know, that opens up the opportunity to really think outside of the box and say, okay, well, you're traditionally the downtown was on Route 20, but now, you know, potentially let's go, you know, north, let's go south, let's extend it. Let's, you know, invite pedestrians in various corners of that particular area. You know, those questions and what makes sense given existing conditions and given your goals, you know, that question of the study area boundary of what downtown is going to be, you know, recognizing existing regulatory districts, but then also saying, you know, do those regulatory districts make sense? I mean, I'm getting into the weeds here, but, you know, the idea here is that you're going to be establishing that downtown and that boundary, you know, so that everybody is aware of what we're talking about. And that's part of the process.
Eugene Kennedy.
Well, I would think the committee should probably take a vote tonight that the downtown and its various elements was the highest priority based on our initial review. And start that process. Since Donnie, I understand, was the planner from VHB who worked on the master plan, and Kathy is the town planner. And we have, by anyone's count, 5 or 6 or 8 or 9 recommendations that relate to the downtown, that those 8 or 9 recommendations can serve as the framework for the scope of services.
Exactly.
In other words, they should be incorporated in the scope of services draft that Donnie can begin to prepare. And while he's doing that, we as a committee should continue to discuss some of the other priorities that rose to the top from the list that you put together, Ashley. For example, proceed to talk about pedestrian access. That's a separate project, separate set of recommendations. And also the town-owned properties ranked fairly high. That should be another distinct agenda item for an upcoming meeting. And I would then envision the committee is able to sort of, balance 2 or 3 projects per meeting, make progress on a monthly basis. And one of the things that we asked from last week, and I think we have staff here to present that, is the status of some of these recommendations. And I would suggest that we proceed in that manner.
Yeah, I would agree. I didn't know if we need a vote, an official vote, to kind of determine that downtown is our top priority and that we'd like Donnie to prepare a draft scope. Does that make sense at this point?
Yeah, Ashley?
Yep, Rick.
Yeah, I agree with Gene. I think each one of these times we decide we want to move something forward, we should document through a vote that it's a decision of the committee to do that. And I think he has a good idea also that if we take this vote and it's in the affirmative, which I imagine it will be, I've got a couple other questions about what it is Donnie's going to do and what he needs from us. And is there anything else we need to accomplish about this tonight? Or do we need a subsequent meeting before our next meeting, even maybe to get some more facts together, let Donnie needs what he needs to. But I don't want to get into that until we've decided officially that downtown is the thing we want to work on first. So I'd move to do that vote. And if that's affirmative, I've got a couple of comments I'd like to make about the downtown before we do anything else.
Okay. Julian, I saw your hand up. Did you want to make a comment before the vote?
Well, I have a question. When you were obtaining these recommendations from the residents and downtown came as, highly recommended, let's say, I don't have the jargon down, I'm sorry. What were people thinking was the downtown? When I, as a resident, filled out the survey and said, downtown is my priority, and a lot of people did say that, what do you think people were envisioning as downtown?
I could respond to that for a minute if you want.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. I mean, I could speculate, but go ahead, Rick.
So during the public meetings, I talked to a number of people, and I think the general feeling was the Route 20 strip that we currently think of as downtown right now, mainly, someplace around the library or just east of the library down to the town hall and kind of going past kind of where the common is now. People were talking about the fact that, that's very busy and difficult to get around in. And so I think people were talking about trying to do something about all of that. I don't think they had a clear idea of what the alternative would be. It's just we had to do something in that particular section of town. I don't think it would limit us to talk about expanding or doing something different in that area. But I think the general feeling for most people was that's kind of what they had in mind. At least the people I talked to, that's what they were talking about.
Yeah, I would have been one of those people who would have said that area, and whatever your steering committee had an idea, I would imagine, as you talked about downtown. So, having to spend a whole lot of time delineating downtown, it's probably, people have a good idea what they think it is. So that's my comment.
I
think that's what people think it is, but that's not what it has to become. I've got a bunch of ideas myself about what a new downtown might look like. So it's a difference between what people think and what we're going to discuss, or at least what I want to discuss as part of this committee, as to what it might be.
Okay, well, then let's take a vote. Does anybody want to make a motion?
Madam Chair, it's Fran. I move that we request from VP to create a scope of service so that we can create a downtown planning revitalization committee who will then be charged with working on that scope of service. think that's what we want to do.
I'm
That
not
was
sure
my
that's,
que-
I'm
that
not
was-
sure that's the motion, Fan. If the motion is just, we move that the committee agrees that the downtown is our first priority, that we want to move forward.
Yeah, I
But-
think
but
that's,
move forward to what? We have to do some.
Well, that's what we got to discuss after we decide this is
Oh,
what we
all
want to
right,
do.
Okay, so
And-
I
and
did
I mean, that was
Dario, I
my-
jumped ahead. Sorry.
that was my question for John, and I think he said we kind of figure that out as we go. You know, do we create the committee now, or is that something that comes after the plan? So I don't think that's been decided yet.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
then I will withdraw my motion. And,
Sorry.
It's okay, it's not.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'll move that the committee agrees that the downtown is the first item that we want to prioritize to the town.
Second,
All those in favor? Oh, take a roll call vote. Julianne,
Aye.
Rick?
Aye.
I didn't ask for any discussion, but anybody? Fran,
Aye.
Tracy,
aye.
Eugene,
Aye.
Adrian,
Aye.
John Campbell,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Jean,
Aye.
Billy.
Aye.
All right. Unanimous. Okay, now, Rick, you wanted to move into discussion on next steps to do with downtown. I know, you know, Scott's here, and I know we should kind of let him say his piece and kind of talk about what's been happening, but if we could quickly talk about next steps here, I think that would be good. Yeah.
Yes, I just need to be, Don, and makes a bit clear about what you need. Like, certainly a big topic of discussion is going to be, you know, do we need to define the new area of the downtown before you can come up with a scope of services? Or are you just going to give us some information that lists as a number of things that we have to do, one of which is figure out what we want the location and the size of the downtown, you know, to be. So I'm just wondering if tonight we have to sort of make some decisions, or whether you're going to give us a roadmap to say, these are the things you guys need to decide. And from that, you know, you can work with John Kadir to come up with an estimate of a scope of services. So I'm just not clear on how much more we need to do tonight, or whether we're going to wait for you to say, here's all the things I need from the committee so I can effectively work with the town to develop some sort of scope of services plan.
Right, yeah, Rick, and I'll let Kathy join in and chime in as well, but I don't need the study area, because that's going to be part of the study and part of the scope of work. You know, I think that requires a lot more thought and consideration before jumping in and assuming that's going to be established before the planning study gets underway. In terms of other inputs that I would need, you know, I mentioned that there's a few descriptions and sorry, I'm looking at the screen right now. A few initiatives that were identified that relate to downtown planning. I would just have to take a look at that and see if there's anything that could be consolidated into this scope of services, just to maximize the efficiency of the process. But Kathy, I don't know if you have any thoughts or suggestions.
No, the only thing I was going to say was about the, you know, what is downtown? Where is downtown? And I think that, you know, as Donnie said, that's going to be part of this planning process for the downtown. And then, you know, not jumping too far ahead, but, you know, if there was this consensus that, you know, the focus of downtown should switch to, say, where, you know, the post office is and the majority of the commercial activity, and you know, it ends up being many more parcels than what we have today in our downtown. You know, we're going to have to adjust, you know, accordingly. And but it again, it's you know, it's in motion. It's a work in motion. But I think we start off initially with, you know, the steering committee really did a fantastic job of putting together these recommendations. And again, those of you that were on the steering committee, you know, it took months to do this. And so, I mean, I think all the basic ideas are already in the recommendations as far as what would be in this downtown study.
Yeah, and to Jean Kennedy's point, there's 8 on this short-term recommendations list, but there are a lot more in the
Right.
master plan. So taking all of those and putting those into the scope, I think will be most of the way there.
Yeah, and that's, you know, I mean, obviously Johnny primarily will be doing the scope, but I mean, that's what, you know, that's what we'll use, you know, as our basis, of course.
I guess,
And
I guess I'd ask that whatever scope Donnie comes up for goes back before the committee for
Oh,
review and
yeah.
discussion. And then
Absolutely.
obviously, once we've decided what that's going to be, if the town goes out and hires a consultant to put this together, that basically the consultant's first group that he works with is our committee.
No doubt. Yep, absolutely, Rick.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so in order to have Donnie work on the scope, you don't need another vote, right? Just request to provide a draft scope prior to the next meeting or for the next meeting, as well as, I think you said there were some examples from other towns that have done a downtown master plan.
Yeah, I could provide that as a supplement to the scope so you can see and compare.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Schedule wise, Donnie, does that work for the November meeting?
I'm gonna have to check. I was gonna follow up with you after, Kathy.
Yeah, okay.
But I just want to make sure that I'm not over-promising to get a scope. But I do know that obviously there's, I mean, Ashley knows, and many of you might, but there's certain grant deadlines that are approaching that we might want to, you know, capitalize on. So
Right.
you know, I'll try my best to get that to you guys on, you know, prior to the next meeting in November.
And
Yeah.
I think what will be so critical is, you know, as John Kadir explained, you know, we have placeholders. So funding, I don't want to say that funding isn't an issue, but we're ready to plug a number in, you know, for this downtown master plan. So so I mean, you know, we'll be going to town meeting in April of 2022.
I did have a quick question about that, Kathy, and I kind of alluded to it at the beginning of the meeting, but there is that grant application, the Community One Stop. I know we included the Downtown Revitalization Initiative in our master plan. We actually called that grant out by name, but when I recently spoke with the grant administrator for that grant. She said, that's too small for you. You should look at the Community Development Grant, which has a expression of interest due December 1st. So is that something we should go for? Is that, you know, and the expression of interest is optional, but it's a helpful process. And then I think the full application in April. So there is time between the two. But she estimated a cost of $100,000 for a downtown master plan, which sounded low to me, but something that could be covered by that grant.
So Ashley, was that Chris?
Her name was Emmy.
Oh, Emmy Hahn. Okay. All right. Yeah. I'll follow up with Emmy.
Okay.
Because in the past, just because of Northborough's socioeconomic status, we have not been eligible for community development block grants. But that has, you know, things certainly could have changed. But I know Emmy very well, so I'll follow up with her. You know, I know you've already spoken to her, but let me get some more details from her about what she would be looking for.
Okay, great.
Yeah, if I may, Ashley. So we always want to do our due diligence, and we always try to apply for grants. But if we don't get a grant, this is a top priority. We're gonna have to find a way to make this happen. So, but I think your point is right on, which is one of the things that I always want to show when I go and ask for money from the taxpayers is that we tried other sources first, and if we don't meet it because we're too well off, then that's the answer. We tried, and so that's why we're here asking for tax dollars. So, but I think your point is spot on. If we can, you know, get in that application, and you never know. I mean, sometimes it's just a matter of who's in the mix and whether or not, you know, there's money available. So.
Okay, and they did say, or Emmy did say, it can be very it can be very short and sweet, this expression of interest that's due December 1st. So Donnie, I don't think it needs a full scope to be laid out. So it's something we could just go for whether the scope is cooked up or not. If Kathy speaks with Emmy and that makes sense, so.
Yeah, I will,
Yeah.
my day is booked tomorrow, but I'll certainly talk to Emmy. I'll shoot her an email and then talk to her at the beginning of the week.
Okay, sounds great. All right, so I think at this point, does it make sense? I think it makes sense to move on to just kind of going over, I know liaisons to other committees have come with, or were to come with which projects their committee is kind of already working on or has completed. We can kind of go through that if that makes sense next, but starting off with Scott's discussion of the work that DPW is doing.
Yeah, Ashley, if I may, just before you
Sure.
go to Scott,
Yeah.
what I'd like to do for you, and I did not have time for tonight, what I'd like to do is give you an update, a written update on these things. I know sometimes we sit here and we talking in real time, and then we start throwing out numbers, and after about the third number, people start getting lost. And I'd like to give you like a little short summary of kind of where all these projects are
Okay.
at your next meeting, if that makes sense. But tonight, just because of, again, I'm just going off of what was distributed for this evening's meeting, you know, the downtown and then some of the pedestrian stuff. I just think it would be helpful. We're in the process of putting an update together for Financial Planning Committee as well as the Board of Selectmen with regard to sidewalks. But we can certainly give you a verbal update kind of tonight on kind of where we are. But there's I probably mentioned like 8 other things, and I'd like to have a chance to give it to you in writing, and then you can ask questions if that makes sense.
Yeah, that would be great. And I know John Campbell sent sort of a long list from open space and kind of what projects are ongoing and what are maybe completed. So if others wanted to do that, we could touch on things tonight, but just send me a list of what's been done, and we can just compile it and kind of, I can make a spreadsheet and check off, label things with what's ongoing, what's done, etc.
Yeah, so Ashley, I might suggest that, and John, if you could just do that within the implementation tracking tool that we established,
right.
that the committee is going to be looking at, so we're not replicating things and everything's in one place. And there's a section on, for notes that, can, if something is completed or if something can be flagged for, a slight revision, or it's partially implemented and other parts have not, we can express in a narrative format what that is. So I believe, Kathy, you sent that out, but and I believe we're also going to be talking about a central repository where we're going to be putting the tracking sheet. So I'll leave that to later in the conversation, but I think if we could all do that in the tracking sheet, so it's all in one place, I think that'd be helpful for the committee moving forward.
Sure. Yeah, that's helpful. That saves a step for sure. So, okay, great. So if John, you wanted to jump in, and then we could go on to Scott.
Yeah, no, I would just, the reason Scott and I wanted to attend, me just kind of tell you that I'm going to give you an update on all these, but specifically tonight, just Scott, I was looking for Scott just to provide you just a little update on the sidewalks. I know this is a big topic, and we've been working on something for almost the better part of 2 years that's coming up that I think will dovetail into this process in anticipation of this process. So through the chair, I would yield to Scott to give you a little update on the sidewalks.
Great. Scott?
Thank you.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can all see each other. Sorry about that.
There you go.
There we go.
I was straining my eyes. I'm
sorry, I forgot.
I can't see anymore.
I have 2 screens and I totally forgot that was up. Sorry about that.
No problem. Thank you, Ashley, and thank you to the committee. So we've been working through our pavement management program for a number of years, dating back to 2015 and 16. Every other year, we have our consultant do a drive around in the community, reassess the roadway conditions. And what I've been doing is asking them to capture 1 or 2 additional pieces of information while they're driving around. It kind of allows us to GIS locate all of our infrastructure in a programmatic fashion without having a gigantic bump in finances, and just gradually gather all of our information. So for example, year 2, we went around, we grabbed all of our guardrails, the locations, the materials, the conditions. 2 years after that, we captured all of our curbing, the material, the reveal, the conditions. We then did our sidewalks. That was 2 years ago. We captured all of our sidewalk locations, materials, and conditions, as well as our wheelchair ramps. In the middle of, during the curbing year, we picked up all of our pavement markings. So over the past, what has it been, 6-7 years, we've compiled a lot of GIS data on all of our roadway infrastructure. Our consultant manages that, gives us a lot of useful mapping. One of the pieces of that is our sidewalks. So currently in our FY22 contract for our pavement management work, we have included 2 sidewalk components. Currently, we know where all of our sidewalks are. Sounds kind of goofy, but I have all of that information on GIS. I have the widths, the materials, and the locations. We know what the conditions are. We have a similar condition rating process for sidewalks, a sidewalk condition index, just like a pavement condition index. It's very similar to the, your grades in school. Our pavement condition index, our PCI in town is a little over 73. It's 73.5 before this year's paving work. Our sidewalk condition index, which we established earlier in 2021, was 73. So we know what our sidewalk conditions are. We know we have 32.3 miles of sidewalks. We have them all listed out as to what condition they're in. Our next step is to how do we manage all this data? So we took a 2-pronged approach. This fiscal year, FY22, we're preparing a sidewalk management plan, very similar to the pavement management plan, where we map out what we own, what the conditions are, where they are, and come up with a capital plan on how we implement improvements in a programmatic fashion. Programmatic, I mean geographic. It doesn't make sense to pop all around town with a contractor. You spend too much money mobilizing and demobilizing. And then you also want to compartmentalize your work so that really bad sidewalks are all done with a similar construction method at the same year, as opposed to 5 or 6 different treatments. Doesn't make financial sense to do 10 different things in a single year. So we're in that process now of coming up with a capital plan for the sidewalks that we currently have. That'll culminate right around the holidays, maybe in January. We'll end up with our sidewalk management plan. It'll be married to our pavement management plan, and we'll have a roadmap going forward with the sidewalks we currently have. In parallel with that, the same consultant is working with us through the Complete Streets program. It's a tiered approach for Complete Streets. It requires some staff training. That's been done. I've gone through the training. I know our town engineer has gone through the training. It requires adoption of a policy. The policy, once adopted, we can then apply for grant funding to the Commonwealth, to Mass DOT. The grant funds can aid us in development of a prioritization plan. These are all mandated by the Complete Streets program. The prioritization plan is similar to the capital plan I described earlier, but it includes things like connectivity, expansion of sidewalks. It identifies destinations, target areas where you have a large residential area and maybe there's a couple schools and there's some missing segments. We already know of some. We know there's a gap on Allen Street. You have trails on Hudson and you have fields on Memorial, on East Main. There's a gap. We have other gaps around. Maple Street's a gap. But the prioritization plan identifies that in a more open and public forums. There's public hearings required through that process. Mass DOT is required to approve the prioritization plan. And once they do, we're then eligible for Complete Streets grants. Building new sidewalks is complicated. It's complicated on many sides, from land acquisition and easements. As soon as you put a curb in, all of a sudden you've changed drainage patterns. So you generally need closed drainage. To the simplest things, if you have a level front lawn that kind of drains gently to the road, and there's no curb or sidewalk, and I put a sidewalk in, I now put a 6-inch tall dam in front of your front lawn. Those are small items, but they're really big to the person whose front lawn just got a sidewalk stuck in front of it. And there's utility issues. So the prioritization plan helps address those larger topics and issues. So that's where we are now. The Complete Streets program is a long process. It can take a year, 18 months to get through a policy adoption, through the public engagement process for the prioritization plan, and then acceptance by DOT. But timing wise, I think it'll work out well. We'll be in the position with our sidewalk management plan to begin implementation in, calendar 22, fiscal year 23. What capacity we have for resources to implement, that's part of the process that John was talking about earlier, through capital planning, through, operating budget, through Chapter 90. When we're into calendar 22, fiscal 23, implementing the sidewalk management plan, the prioritization plan will be in full force. It'll be developed and going forward to DOT so that in calendar 23, those two things can come together in advance of town meeting. That's kind of my goal and approach. I want to keep momentum in public works for critical projects like sidewalks, but I also want to level the funding structure for it. So every year we have a nice stable approach where we're not having these giant undulations of massive expenditures and then drop-offs. It's a programmatic approach to managing a piece of infrastructure that's important, but unfortunately gets overlooked because people drive by and they want their roads fixed first. So that's where we are. It's been a work in progress for a number of years. And all the calls we get and emails I get from people who want sidewalks added. Amy, I know I've talked to you about sidewalks along Davis. There's a segment there that disconnects Indian Meadows neighborhood from Northgate. It's an important location. So those aren't forgotten or lost. They're going to come to fruit through that prioritization plan with Complete Streets.
So Ashley, if I may, just to dovetail on what Scott, there was a lot of information. Thank you, Scott. Really,
thank you, Scott.
for us, when it comes to this type of stuff, just like the roadway management plan, we want it to be as objective as it can be in terms of, the conditions are determined by a third-party objective assessment. Cost estimates are put in place, and then you have a priority listing or criteria about how you're evaluating what needs to be done first in terms of safety hazards, and then connecting gaps, as Scott said, that have been identified. So that's the process that we would go through. So what we've done is we've as anticipation as the master plan was going through, we're putting ourselves in a position to have the data and the assessments, so that then we can start talking about, okay, just like we did with the roadway, is now we need to talk about how we're going to fund this. So we have opportunities for grants, but we have tried to work in to the capital plan, a set amount of money every year that we would be investing in sidewalks. And I don't want people to think we haven't done anything with sidewalks. We do sidewalks whenever when we repair a roadway, repave. So sidewalks have gotten done, but if you want to expand sidewalks and you want to connect, and the most logical thing is connecting where we have sidewalks and there's a gap, that's the most bang for your buck. But if you want to do that, we need to have a funding source. And that could be tax dollars, it could be some grants. That's the piece where, that we'll be working on in the upcoming cycles. But again, a lot of that work has been done, just like the pavement management. Every year we put $1.1 million into our roads. Where you want to be is have a target figure that, if you put it into the roadways every year, what your condition index is going to be, either stabilized or improving. And then as resources permit, you add more. That's the logical approach. What we want to take out is, 100 people show up at a meeting and yell from a neighborhood that they want a sidewalk. That's not how, a resource allocation should take place. There should be a plan, criteria, and a logical approach, so that people have some expectation of when their sidewalk or their project would come forward. So that's what we've been working on, and that's what will come forward. What helps is if this committee says, yes, that is a priority, then that goes to financial planning as a priority. It's appropriations. It helps us even in the grant applications to be able to say, out of the master plan, this is a priority, and that's why we're going for it. They want to see community support for when it comes to grants. It's a big component, is making sure that we can show that everybody's on the same page for what it is we're asking for. So.
Yeah, I mean, what would be the best way for us to express our support for this? Because I think it's clear from the short-term recommendations that this is one of our top priorities, if not, it's tied with downtown sort of in a way. It got the most overall votes, the sidewalk work. So, what's the best way to do that to allow you to do what you need to do and get the funding to do it? And is there anything else that we can do to assist or help or?
Yeah, I think our approach is to create just like we did with a roadway pavement management plan, to create a sidewalk master plan. The data's been collected, the criteria gets established, and then you have the tough piece on the sidewalks, frankly, is coming up with the funding. Sidewalks are much more expensive, I think, than people think they are, because they don't think about the drainage and the land acquisition, and then we have to cut down a 100-year-old oak tree in front of your house. You're not going to be happy about that. So it's a lot of communication and process.
Ashley?
Yeah, Rick?
Yeah, I think it'd be a good idea fairly soon. I like the idea of the planning and the prioritization and working through this Complete Streets program. But I think it'd be a good idea when this committee, and maybe the next meeting or the meeting after that, when we decide that we want to talk about this particular topic, Scott, to have you here, because there was a nuance to sidewalks that came through the master planning process. Basically, the feedback we got from the people that attended the meetings and filled out the surveys, the connectivity they were looking for were neighborhoods to recreation facilities, neighborhoods to trails, neighborhoods to the downtown. And the downtown, what that's going to be is going to fall out over time. So there may be certain things that you guys have in mind for what you want to do and make sense to do in general as a priority. But I think you need to understand what came out of the master plan process and how that might be in addition or somewhat different than what you had in mind, and how does that get reconciled, if at all, so that not only can the master plan committee support this, but can also feel comfortable that the general concept of what we heard in the steering committee and what's in the plan has a chance to get implemented, over time. So some of the areas in town that we may be talking about for sidewalks may not be areas that you're thinking about, only because you have a perspective that's different than perspective that came out of the plan. So I think we need to sort of have as the committee talks about sidewalks and talks about what came out of the master plan process, you kind of understand that, and then you can feed back to us about, how that all fits into what you're thinking about, and how do we work together to get a whole number of things for sidewalks accomplished over some period of time.
Through the chair, Rick, that's exactly the plan I have going forward. The sidewalk management plan is the mundane engineering, numbers, what do I do, where do I do it, what do I fix, what's a logical approach. The prioritization plan that is associated with the complete streets, that's where I believe this committee can really help in identifying what the citizenry wants, needs, the destinations in the neighborhoods, the history that went through the master plan steering committee process and the implementation committee. That's where my knowledge is lacking, and that's where this committee is going to be incredibly helpful for me and our consultants to formulate that prioritization plan. And if it can come to fruition in a time frame that marries itself nicely with the downtown revitalization plan, that would be wonderful. Because Route 20 is Mass DOT, Chapter 90 is DOT, Complete Streets is DOT. They love seeing a concerted effort from a variety of perspectives on improvements. So Rick, I think that would be fantastic.
I think we're saying the same thing.
Ashley,
Yeah.
may I speak as well?
Yes, Jean.
So one thought I had is that there are probably a lot of sidewalks out there that are underutilized and that other areas that really need sidewalks. And I wondered if that assessment of use or needed provision for people who are, say, jogging down Route 20, who shouldn't, where it's not safe now, like, do we have that kind of data of just where we have sidewalks we don't need and perhaps they don't need to be in the same condition and then where sidewalks are absolutely necessary for public safety. And also with talking about DOT and Route 20, what is our plan for bikeability as well as walkability?
Right, does Complete Streets, it does capture bikeability as well, right? But is that something you're considering as part of this? Maybe not. That might be part of the downtown plan.
It's bikeability, so Complete Streets is all about multimodal use, pedestrians, cyclists, mobility impaired, as well as vehicles. So part of the prioritization plan is absolutely shared bike lanes, bikeability. That's absolutely part of it. And I would assume that's going to be part of what it is put together with the downtown revitalization.
And from what I've seen in other communities, it involves like things like street lights and various things that create a safer and more available pedestrian route, right? I mean, not that we're considering that at this point, but it can be broader, right? And just
That was one of the topics that I believe Dario brought up with the pedestrian crosswalk bump outs. So, you define parallel parking with pedestrian bump outs. It has a visual narrowing of the roadway, which just naturally slows drivers. And Donnie, you know this better than I do, I'm sure. That's all part of the downtown development that gives it this safe walkability, open look to it. It's a wonderful traffic calming component, and it really promotes walkability.
So then it makes even more sense to have these two plans come together, and that prioritization plan can consider some of those things that come out of the downtown revitalization plan.
Yep.
It's great. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
Great. So at this point, do you need any? Oh, sorry, Julianne.
I just have a question for Scott. So there must be some kind of science and regulations behind sidewalks, certain width and what makes a pedestrian feel safe. Are like as a pedestrian, I feel safer when it's a clean cut granite curb. And of course the sidewalks are moved in a little bit. So in your assessment of our current sidewalks, is that possible to kind of make the sidewalks as optimal as possible?
We look at that on a street by street basis. So if you drive up Castle Road, we rebuilt Castle Road recently, and Castle Road was an airstrip. It was a swath of pavement, very wide. We narrowed that up on each side. We were able to give it a wider grass strip without modifying the drainage. It was we reached out to some of the neighbors to talk to them about it. They were in favor of it. So when it's an appropriate neighborhood, then we absolutely look at that. If there's an opportunity within the right of way to push the sidewalk back in a full reconstruction project with right of way and add a 2-foot grass strip, I think that makes every pedestrian feel safer, that their child is walking next to them and there's some grass there, not a drop off to the roadway. So we look at that. Unfortunately, the right of way is what drives that decision often, but we certainly look at that.
Thank you so much.
So I don't know if anybody else has any comments at this point. My question was really, at this time, do you want us to take any votes on, this being our next priority? Because I think from the spreadsheets, it's clear that it is.
That would be helpful for the committee to acknowledge that, pedestrian access is second priority for this committee, and that helps me going forward in development of the Complete Streets process with the state, because I communicate with DOT every month or so about the process with the policy, so they're kind of queued up before the next step that we engage. And the next step will be coming to you with a prioritization plan, charrette, so to speak, and engagement. So that'll be our next step.
Great. Does anyone want to make a motion to that effect?
Or not, Madam Chair, or not.
Development of a master,
I'm
a sidewalk
not
master
hearing,
plan.
I mean, I'm ready to make that motion, but not hearing anything. I just wonder, are there any other comments, pro or con? Because I'll make the motion, but I'm just a little bit
Yeah.
concerned that nobody has jumped in to do anything yet. So
Scott and I put
Right.
everybody to sleep.
am I jumping the gun here or?
Yeah, is
people okay
anybody
with it?
else feeling like there should be, that's not really the correct reading of the recommendations prioritization that we did, or just wanted to.
I think Scott's info is very reassuring that there's
Yeah.
plans already in place, so I like everything he said.
One comment, just again, it's a plan. So, it's a first pass at a plan, just like the capital improvement plan is a plan. It changes. And, one of the things is to revisit it on a regular basis, make sure it's serving the community. So, but the big nut of it is getting the data and so that you can make sense of it and make informed decisions about what you're doing. And we're kind of there. So.
Great.
Yeah, I can motion that we move forward with the sidewalks being second priority.
I'll second that motion.
All right, I'll take a roll call. Julianne,
Aye.
Rick,
Aye.
Tracy,
Aye.
Eugene.
Aye.
That was Adrian and Eugene at the same time. Adrian, that was you, right? All right,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Bill.
Aye.
John Campbell,
Aye.
Fran,
Aye.
Jean Cahill,
Aye.
Millie, I made the motion.
Aye.
All right. Great. Unanimous. And Ashley, I had to say I didn't count myself.
Ashley, if I could, I'm just wondering, given the time, a couple
Yeah.
thoughts. Would the committee want to, because I think everyone is in agreement with this, the later past 9 o'clock it goes, people's productivity. So would you want to consider starting at 6, so that you sort of have pretty much an extra hour every meeting, looking at 6 to 9. And then I'm thinking that your next meeting in November, which I won't be present at. Well, actually, I might be. I have to go out for some surgery, and I'm not sure if I'll be working from home by then. But would you want to look at just setting the next agenda to be, having everyone come back from the various that are members of other committees to talk about what it is that they've discussed, such as what John Campbell provided everyone tonight. And then Donnie and I will talk, over the next couple of days about schedule wise for the scope, whether that will be a draft scope would be ready for November meeting or December meeting. And I checked your December meeting, which would be the 16th. I was thinking it was the week after, which I think would be very, too close to the holidays. But, if people are still comfortable with the 16th, that, Donnie and I will figure out whether he'll talk about the scope in November or December.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And if everyone wants to kind of send their list as John Campbell did, then we can kind of have that spreadsheet updated and can go through it in that way. So that might be helpful and a little bit more efficient.
John, you'd be able to get your list to us for that November meeting?
You talking about me or John Campbell?
John Codere, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that would be, yeah, I'll put together the information I have for you by that meeting. Sure, absolutely.
For November, John?
Yes,
November, okay.
November 16th, that's the next meeting we're talking about, right?
November 18th, yeah.
18th or 16th?
Yes, it's
November 18th, and December would be December 16th.
okay. November
18th
8th.
and 12, 16. Yeah, hopefully I won't have I generally meet with appropriations financial planning committees on Thursdays. So, so hopefully a 6 p.m. start would be good if you guys
Okay.
want to do that, because I would have to have a hard stop.
Yeah, John Campbell?
Just, Madam Chair, if I may, I think it's the length of meetings that can make people lose attention. And I know there's times when meetings have to run over, but I'm against the idea of planning for 3-hour meetings. If the board agrees to meet for 2 hours and meeting at 6 on any night or certain nights is important, and I can make those arrangements, but I'm open to comment on that. But I think after a couple of hours, everyone seems to fade. And if our agenda is more tightly written, which has been hard in the beginning, I think we can be more efficient.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's good. And if we're tackling only a couple of priorities each time, and hopefully we'll get to that point, then we should be able to keep it to 2 hours. I'm open to 6 p.m. That gets tricky, but I'm open to hear what others.
As staff, we love 2-hour meetings.
Yeah, okay.
That's refreshing. And like I said, I just threw out 6, that if, people are fresher at 6 than they are at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
So
6 is tricky too for me, Ashley, but I'll accommodate. It's
No,
only.
it is.
one
I
night a
know it's
month.
hard for people, especially people that are traveling.
It just depends. You got to plan ahead, but
Yeah.
I'll go with the consensus.
I'm a
Is anybody
retired
else?
guy. I have dinner at 4:30 now, so I can do anything.
Well, it sounds like for the next meeting, John Codere could make it at 6. So do we want to plan the next meeting for 6 to 8?
That's
Let's
fine with
do that.
me if we want to just do for that one and maybe we keep it at 7 unless we have to move it up. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a
That
good
sounds
plan.
good.
It's, 6 o'clock for the next one, and we'll play it by ear for future ones.
Jim, does that work for you as host? He might be on the other meeting.
Yeah,
Sorry,
the
go ahead.
earlier probably works for him.
I was
Okay.
eating dinner. Sorry. Yeah, 6 o'clock works for me.
Go ahead and rub it in. Some of us haven't eaten, Jim.
Yeah, really.
Sorry about that.
I
not
had 2
fair.
bags of M&Ms for dinner.
All right. Thanks,
You
Jim.
know, Rick is.
Right. Yeah, Rick's all set.
I'm going to be ready for a glass
Rick's
of
ready for bed.
Yeah, I'm going to be ready for bed by then. Yeah.
All right, so the 18th, we'll go 6 to 8, and the focus will be on reviewing committees, other committees that have gone through
Updates, the scope of services for
Yeah.
the downtown,
Well, hopefully
and updates on projects. Yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Yeah, I think that should be sufficient.
Okay.
And before we wrap up tonight, did Donnie just want to briefly, and you, Kathy, discuss the sort of file sharing? I think that sounded like it would be a fairly quick agenda item. But
Yeah,
I mean,
actually, Donnie, unless you have something else, I've talked to our MIS director, and originally I wasn't thinking of editing, so but Donnie reminded me that we're all going to be using the task sheet that he put together. So I just have to touch base with our director, IT director, and get that going.
okay. So just if nobody knows, that's going to be a SharePoint, a Microsoft SharePoint.
Most likely, it's going to be SharePoint.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what we had originally, at least that's what David and I had talked about, but if he's got any other questions, he'll just talk directly to Donnie.
Okay. All right, great. And I didn't want to pass it over. John Campbell, you had mentioned discussing sort of a more clear prioritization kind of strategy for looking at items. So I think maybe we can put that on the agenda for next time to discuss whether we want to set some clear
criteria.
Yeah, for reviewing the projects.
Yeah, I think that's fine. It's not so much, doesn't necessarily have to be a formal list so much as it becomes a habit for each subsequent discussion,
Yeah.
And you don't get off track. Now we've narrowed things quite a bit with the discussion tonight, so that's effective, but just to practice to get into as a committee.
Yeah, I think that'll be helpful. I know there are a few other kind of administrative things that we kind of need to go over as well. So we'll see if we have time for the next meeting or maybe the following one. That'd be good. All right. Well, I think we accomplished a lot. Does anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, I'll take a roll call. Julianne?
Aye.
Rick?
Aye.
Tracy?
Aye.
Eugene?
Aye.
Adrian?
Yes.
Amy?
Aye.
Fran? John Campbell?
Aye.
Bill Peterson?
Aye.
Everybody just moved around on me. I think Jean Cahill?
Aye.
And Millie?
Aye.
And Ashley? Aye. All right. We are
Thanks,
adjourned.
everyone.
Thanks,
Yeah.
everybody.
Thank
Good night,
you.
everyone.
Thanks, y'all.
Have a
Appreciate your
great
time.
night.
Good night.